In this episode, we are meeting someone who is Executive Vice President Publisher and previously Chief Commercial Officer for News UK. News UK is a prominent name which owns The Sun, The Times, The Sunday Times, and Virgin Radio, Talk Sports, and Talk TV. The person who we are talking to has been on Google's list of top 10 UK role models. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dominic Carter. Dominic, welcome to the In Conversation show.
Thank you, and it's really good to be here and a privilege to be invited.
How are you doing?
Very good. Tired, long day so far, but looking forward to the rest of it.
Fantastic. I'm excited. All right, so before we get into the intense discussions and try to learn in terms of your experience and background, let's break the ice. What is the most daring thing that you've done so far?
Well,
you cannot skip the questions, by the way.
I can't skip the question. Okay, so I think there's always a question of what's daring. Daring that you're in control of or daring that you're not in control of. So daring that I haven't been in control of was probably being put in boarding school here when I was just over 9 years old. That's pretty daring, given the environment I was coming into, but at the end of the day, wasn't my choice, so I won't include that one. I think daring from my point of view was probably having done a couple of years at Teesside Uni, or Teesside Poly as it was back in the day, if I can say back in the day, it's a bit old-fashioned. I then jumped on a train a day after I finished and went to London and started work the following Monday. So I think that was quite daring. I'd never been into London other than as a child with my parents, but jumping on a train and heading into my new life, I think was pretty daring at the time.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right, what is the element of work that you enjoy the most? I mean, at work normally, in a normal day, I mean, what is the thing that gives you the maximum energy, or something that you enjoy the most at work?
Someone gave me a cup the other day. It was my birthday yesterday, just so you know. Someone gave me a cup, and the cup said, I'm surrounded by idiots. I'm not actually surrounded by idiots, but I have this thing of always, people come to me with challenges all the time, and I think that's the thing that probably, I enjoy most is trying to get my head around the challenges. But in reality, that's the job. There's another part that I probably enjoy more, which is really helping people get on in their careers. So I mentor a lot of people. I sponsor a couple of people in the business as well. So my MO really is now, and I think maybe it's a function of age and experience, is that actually trying to nurture people to know how to navigate their way through an organisation and get on with their careers, I think is a thing that I probably enjoy most. But obviously in business, I've got to make money, and there's a part of that, there's a good mental challenge. How do you organise people to do the jobs that you need done? How do you make sure that the strategic decisions that you're making are the ones that can deliver the ROI, and any investments that you're making do so as well? So I'm challenged probably most enjoyably by people, but mentally by the tasks in terms of the strategy that I adopt for the business.
Brilliant. Dominic, I wanted to ask this. How do you see the future of media? So let's say 7 years from now, so we're talking about 2030, or maybe 10 years from now, 2033. How do you see the landscape of media will change based on your understanding and insights? What do you think future looks like?
It's a really difficult question, because in a way you'd say 2030 is a long time in media, because the evolution has been so rapid, really. Sometimes it feels slow. You look at it from the outside, like we still publish newspapers, but actually there's a massive proportion of society that still wants a newspaper. So actually, as the market changes, I think that the biggest changes that we'll see are much more regulatory than anything else. So I think there will be, if you think about the platforms which may have been around for many people for the whole of their lives, seemingly, for those that are Gen Zers, certainly. But for us, and I include you in us because you're not as old as me, but for us oldies, the reality is these are relatively recent businesses, but they've scaled so fast, but they've scaled and the controls haven't been put around them. And I think what you'll find is that regulation will come into play for platforms. Platforms can't just publish content, and not accept responsibility for that content. So I think there'll be regulation, and I think that will start to change the dynamic. We've already seen a significant change in the media industry with the cookie and the deprecation of that cookie, from Firefox, Safari, the privacy around Apple and what Apple are doing, and Google obviously won't support the cookie, and at some point we'll switch it off. So I think there's a whole different approach that advertisers are going to have to take. But I think the biggest change will be regulation, and I think there'll be more consolidation. Because businesses, when you think about the big tech companies, all the other publishers, broadcasters are just not big enough to compete. So I think we'll see more consolidation around there, but some restriction through regulation on the platforms.
So regulations, and by consolidation, you mean mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, mergers and acquisitions,
conglomerates and stuff, right? Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, an extension to that, so as we picture that landscape of media in the near future, right? So maybe not distant future, but in the near future, I understand the regulatory challenges, but what other challenges do you think we can foresee at this point in time they will be coming? Apart from the governance and regulatory and the digital platforms, as you mentioned.
So, there's challenges. Look, there's challenges every day that you have to confront. If you'd have asked me 12 months ago, would I have predicted, or probably just 18 months ago, would I have predicted, what impact would happen, or would I have even foreseen in any way, shape or form we'd have a war in Europe, an illegal war in Europe. But the impact of that war has created significant headwinds for anyone that's in industry, but more especially for people that are in the publishing industry. And I say that because there's a big part of our business is still in print. The manufacturing of newspapers is using energy. To create paper, the suppliers use energy. So the cost of inflation has been really significant. The distribution, which takes lorries and people, the cost again has been incredible. So the headwinds on the business have been significant for us. So for every publisher, that's been the case. But it also drives change. So your business has to adapt really, really quickly. One, to meet the headwinds that you've got coming at you, and you've got to mitigate those, and you've got choices of how you can mitigate them. But you have to mitigate those changes because you still have targets that are that are EBITDA driven, and you still have to build for the future. So I think it's certainly in our industry, what I've seen is the speed at which we've adapted to meet the headwinds. But I think when you look at the challenge ahead of us, ultimately the biggest challenge is the consumer. The consumer habit has changed. If you go back to pre-pandemic, what we've all seen in the publishing industry is a significant decline on print, which you would expect that would happen. People weren't commuting, people weren't going to work. They were told to stay at home and stay safe. So, but what has happened is that didn't return post-pandemic, so the declines have continued. So what you've seen is a habit, which everyone says it doesn't take long, to form a habit. That habit formed and they haven't gone back, and the habit has changed. And and as devices get more powerful in your hand, so you have to meet the speed at which people want that information. And the consumer change, is the most significant thing. And as you get new platforms emerging, the vertical vortex, if you like, of TikTok, people disappear down something actually, I think leads again to part of the regulation. These things are quite dangerous in many ways, and I think that the challenge is how do you distribute your content to get it in front of people, when they want it, in the way that they want it, in a massively evolving world driven by increasing speed of technology and telecommunication. So that's the biggest challenge for all of us.
Lovely, fantastic. Just an extension from the point that you mentioned, Dominic. So, in the age of digital first, right? So, how do you see, what are the prospects of print media versus digital media? We have touched upon as you mentioned just now, but what are the prospects do you see? If you draw a line between print media versus digital media, what do you see? What kind of picture comes to your mind?
So it's a wrestle that we all have, because my view on this is there isn't a print versus digital. We're in a business that is, for my business, we're in a business of storytelling. And that business is gathering stories. It's called journalism. Gathering stories, going into war zones, uncovering truths. Challenging people in authority. If they've done wrong. Without fear or favour. And these are the principles that you have to work to. There are choices that people make about how they want that content, and we have to meet those needs. It comes back to what I just said, which is how do you distribute your content in a way that gives people what they want? So for us, we've had, if I look back in time, The Sun is still number one in the market as a news brand. I don't differentiate between print and digital. I have a very real need. I have to manufacture and distribute my content that way. The opportunity that's been open to me is that I can expand that business, and I have the fastest growing news website in the US, which is The Sun. So I can grow a business and expand it internationally. So I don't see it as print versus digital. I see it as we're a content business first. We have to distribute that content. We become logistics experts at doing that both digitally and in print, because we have to do it as efficiently as possible. And as one goes, and declines, it's fine. The other continues to grow and accelerate. So it isn't print versus digital. It's print and digital, and it's content and distribution of that content first and foremost. The newspaper comes out once a day. You gear your day around the manufacturing and creation of the stories that engage with consumers, and if you can do that really well, it doesn't matter what the medium is, what the platform is.
Lovely, that's insightful, right? So there's no divide as such, print versus digital, and as you mentioned about the storytelling, the narrative, I mean that's so content first. I mean that's the ideology, philosophy that comes first, rather than digital first.
I mean, we have in our office we have quite a big statement, and one of the things that clearly we tell the stories that matter. You do it whether you lean forward or sit back. So you have to engage with people, but we're in a constant evolution of storytelling, and we constantly have to reinvent the way that we tell stories. And and if you look back in time over media, when TV was created, everyone said it would kill wireless, it would kill the radio. It didn't. Radio's in rude health today. Digital was going to kill newspapers. Newspapers have more consumption today than they've ever had in their history. So I never sort of never feel like there's a threat. I feel like there are opportunities. What you have to do is to understand how to make the most of them. And that is innovation. It's a combination of innovation, using technology, and building your business around people that have expertise in the distribution. And that is it. And if you can do that really well, your business will thrive and continue to thrive, and you will become less concerned about, you become much more agnostic about the platform that content's on.
That's so interesting. I mean, fantastic. Talking about, you mentioned about audience preferences and changing audience and the pandemic time, pre-pandemic, and the levels after that. But how do you think the consumer is changing? Right, so for particularly the audience that we're talking about. So, do you think the way they respond now, they react now to those stories, to the news, to the content? Do you think their preferences have changed? I mean, you mentioned about the pandemic context, but I mean, do you think there's a dramatic change that we can foresee moving on? And if yes, then how do you think the way they react and respond that would change?
Look, the consumer changes all the time. Each generation has a different thing. I mean, you and I probably didn't grow up with a smartphone, but we've had to learn to adapt to them. There's a generation that have only known about a smartphone, and their access to information, content, is actually superior to what it was in our day when we had to go and sit in the library. I'm speaking very selfish, actually. I shouldn't be including you in this. I'm much older than you, but we'd have to go to the library to source information. It would take longer. It's not as readily available. I mean, the conversations I can have with my children, about subject matter that I probably knew when I was 10 years older than them, that I can have with them as teenagers is quite incredible. And so I think that consumer is changing depending on the generation, which is why you still have a group of people that want to buy a newspaper, and some that are just not interested in newspaper. It's out of date when it comes out, and those that are just live and online all the time. So I think what people have become accustomed to is that there's as my kids would say, I always say, protect yourself about the data. Be careful, don't shut your cookies off and all that sort of thing. They go, that's done. It's done. So that's their view, and I think for many that is true, that it's done. So their consumption habit is very, very different to an older generation. I don't see them as threats, because I go back to the same thing. All we have to do is to ensure that we're distributing that content. Where we were in newspapers, where we still to be publishing newspapers and ignored digital, we'd all be out of business now. So we had to embrace it. Where TV is, linear TV is today, is the thing that they're now fronting is, since the rise of Netflix and Amazon Prime, what they've seen is that actually there's a generation of people that just stopped watching linear TV. So they now have to adapt, and they're all building digital models and digital distribution of their content, around drama, subscribe to, and I think that that is something that people are becoming more used to, that if you want to get high quality content in whatever form, you probably have to pay. And that is probably a good thing for all of us, but from a world where we all thought everything's going to be for free, we've all now realized that actually, it is worth paying for if it's of high quality. So I don't think any of those things are threats. They all become, just part of how do you do that then? How do you shift from what is a free digital model to be a paid for digital model? What sort of things do you have to create that those customers, will value? And stop thinking that actually everything that you do is the thing that people want. People want bits of it and are willing to pay for bits of it that they really value. And I think every company is going to start adapting to that. We've seen it in the pandemic with every retailer moving to digital, moving to direct to consumer, something that many businesses resisted for years. So the habit of that consumer is always changing. And if you're not meeting the needs, you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Difficult challenge to overcome though, but because it's a moving target. Right?
The biggest shift is in the mindset of the people that have got used to doing something one way, and what you're trying to do is expand mindsets, and where you can't expand mindsets, you have to bring in new skills, and the new skills and new ways of consumption that some people have grown up with is probably a skill that needs to come into newsrooms and come into media businesses, that haven't inherently been there. So you're constantly having to bring in new talent, and new skill sets and new thinking, to move the business forward. And it's not always about throwing out the old. It's just, not being ageist, but throwing out those that have only learned one thing. It's actually making sure that everyone's constantly adapting and evolving and learning, and if you can get that skill, then, you've all got a great career ahead of you.
Fantastic. Dominic, in this time and age, what are advertisers looking for?
Well, I think when digital came along, I think all advertisers thought, we know the answer. The 50% of our money that was wasted, we now know where it was. And it's all about targeting and using data. Advertisers ultimately, you want two things for advertising. You want brand saliency, you want people to think about your brand, and you want a return on investment. I think advertisers, and I think about the job themselves of marketeers. Marketeers always get discussed as a cost, and it's an easy thing to cut. Mm-hmm. The fact is, marketing is an investment, and it's the thing that allows your business to grow. And I think increasingly what advertisers need to be able to, what they want is both of those things, more brand saliency and return on investment. But in order to deliver that, you need to get at the top table. Don't see yourself as a cost. Understand that businesses grow because of your investment. These are strategic decisions that you make to grow your organization. You need to be able to talk the language of the CFO. What they really want is to be seen in context, not have any risks, being in the wrong environment that create a risk to the brand, and engaging on an emotional level, with consumers. Because rational decision making is basically cheap advertising. Buy your cheapest fridge here. I'll do that when it's an emergency. Okay, cheap fridges, I'll search in there. That's the brand. So I now have a view of that brand. It only sells cheap fridges. What you want is an emotional thing that I want to stick with the brand for a long time. And the way you get to have an emotional relationship and an engaged relationship with the client is to think about your product mix and think about your customer engagement, and how you set yourself up and what your values are as a brand. Those things have always been consistent. And I think people thought that because of the advent of digital, you could just target and you can sell volume, but actually in time, you just lose margin, and you just eventually lose any resonance that you may have had with a consumer from a brand perspective. So advertisers are moving back to that, which is why context is becoming much more important in the communication that advertisers are having, with the consumer about their brands.
Brilliant, insightful. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Last but not the least, any tips for those who want to make a career in media journalism? I mean, I understand there are multiple skills and knowledge and behavior attributes that we need. But any prominent ones that you think that's a must, that's critical, that's vital, right? So any skill set.
So I think going into journalism today is pretty similar to what it was. As I say, the job that we're trying to do is to ensure in this democratic society that we uncover the truth and we distribute content to everybody that needs to know that this is something that's going on. So you're creating information for people, so that they can be well informed and help them navigate their daily lives. And I think that has to be something that is in your gut that you feel that you want to do. But I think increasingly what you'll find as a journalist, where we used to say that there's church and state, the commercial functions over here and editorial is over there. Now, if you're a journalist today in a digital world, if you don't understand that those stories get distributed in a digital world, you're only doing part of your job. Because you could write amazing stories, but if you're not getting them in front of people, they're a waste of time. So increasingly journalists have to be broader than, and they're not being commercial, but they have to understand the distribution of stories, what SEO means, how you use social media, which are the bits that make money and don't make money as well. Because ultimately, without revenue and money, you can't fund the thing that we all know is really important to society, which is journalism. So I think they're much more holistic now and much more, not just journalists, but also have a very good understanding of the needs of the business. But with all of this and anything in media, I think one of the challenges that we have as media organisations is demonstrating that actually any job that you want to do actually can be done in media. We have a TV business, we have a radio business, we're in digital, we're in print, we're global. So if you're a data analyst, data scientist, journalist, production expert, there's a job for anyone with those skills, in media businesses. These are huge, exciting, diverse, and right at the heart and the pulse of everything that's going on around this country and around the world. And I think they're the most exciting jobs that people can have. And therefore, I would say, if you have passion for information, knowledge, influence, and also passion for building and evolving and innovating, come into the media business and work hard, and you'll have a great career.
Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you, Dominic. What a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you. So we hope you enjoyed the conversation. We'll see you again with another episode and another speaker. Thank you.